Well, the NFL draft is officially over for everyone, including the Cleveland Browns, who came away with one of the more bizarre looking drafts when all things are said and done here in terms of the players that they took and the players that they took multiple pieces of. But a lot to talk about nonetheless, including, Megs, I buried the lead here. Shador Sanders is a Cleveland Brown. How about that? Just the way we scripted it, right? Just the way we drew it up. He'd be there in the fifth round and he'd be around.
Just the way we drew it up, dude. Like, just the way we drew it up. We talked about it last night. I told everybody all the reasons why Dylan Gabriel was a great selection, all the stuff, all that.
You said he was Russell Wilson 2.0, if I remember correctly.
2.0. I was banging the drum, Super Bowl, Super Browns, the whole thing, and then Shedeur. Like, just how you draw it up, right?
Yeah, it was a pretty wild day. It made for a pretty wild day, all things considered, especially when I sort of told you this story here before we started going live. We were literally in a press conference with the three of the four guys taken yesterday. Dylan Gabriel was not here because he lives in Hawaii, and that is a very, very long flight. But Quinshon Judkins was here. Obviously, Harold Fannin Jr. was here as well. And then Carson Schlesinger was here. And they all were at the podium at the same time, taking questions. Their introductory press conference, it was all nice. And then all of a sudden, we get the alerts and the notification the Browns had traded back up. And then we get the notification that they're taking Shador Sanders. And it kind of took the wind out of the sails for this introductory press conference that I was really excited about because I really wanted to talk to Quinshon Judkins. But it ended sort of prematurely. And then the Shador Sanders news happens, and the Browns come away with two quarterbacks in this draft. Yeah, and so, Megs, like, there's a lot to unpack here. Obviously, starting with the fact that he slipped to the fifth round, and there's a number of, I think there's kind of a multitude of reasons why that happened. I don't think it's one individual thing in terms of like, well, teams didn't like his attitude. I don't think it's just that. I do think, from what I understand, meetings with teams, multiple teams, didn't go so well on a number of fronts. I think personality was one thing. I think there was some questions about like how he sort of handled certain situations that were thrown his way. And so I think that turned some people off. I also do think, like, Kevin Stefanski talked about this last week, or I guess it was this week on Wednesday. All these days at this point just blur together. That the thing they look for in a quarterback, but at all positions, is an elite trait. And Shador doesn't have that elite trait. He's just kind of like a steady, consistent quarterback that does certain things well, but nothing exceptional. And so I think that sort of combination of things, plus the sideshow you get with him being Deion Sanders' son and all that, I think turned a lot of teams off. But I always said from the start that I thought the Browns were a fit. When people were criticizing him for his brashness, quote unquote brashness, they would say, and the way he sort of goes about his business and what they call cockiness, I called it confidence. And I have said time and time again, I feel like that's something a Browns quarterback needs, because you're trying to shake off this history of just failed quarterback after failed quarterback. And so I think Shador could be set up for success here. It's all going to come down to this quarterback competition, which we'll talk about here in a second. But I am glad that this was the outcome and that he ends up here, because I'm excited to see him try to he strikes me as a guy, Megs, that is going to do everything in his power to be great at the next level. And you want guys like that on this roster, no matter what people might think about him from this pre-draft process.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild thing because everyone has this like wild perception of Shador's like this bad character, like this evil villain. And you're like, wait a second, this is a kid who just has done like everything right. And he's got a loud personality. He's very vibrant. He's all the things, kind of like his dad in some ways, but this dude works. He works his tail off. He works his ass off. And it shows. Like, he's a very good football player, one of the most accurate football players in the entire this entire quarterback class. So bringing him in is certainly a positive from that perspective. The other perspective that I think is really important and can get lost in this is, yes, everywhere he went with Coach Prime and all the things that come with it. But he was kind of in charge of a rebuild of two programs, Jackson State and Colorado. So he knows what it looks like in a building that, doesn't win. He understands what it's like to work hard to get victories and to earn it. And Spence, you can tell me if I'm wrong. Like, you listened to it live, his press conference. Like, one of the takeaways that I heard just kind of scrolling Twitter is like, this seems like a kid who's got his head on his shoulders, right? He said all the right things, talked about how he's got to make his mark with the veterans and really prove himself. And one of the tweets I saw was like, sounds like such an easy kid to root for. And I wonder what your perspective was on that, just listening to him talk for the 12 minutes or so that he did in his conference call.
I mean, people are going to say I'm biased probably because I've been on this Shedeur train for the entire offseason, but I've always felt like he should be a kid that's easy to root for. And I think that people have gotten wrapped up in the Deion Sanders part of this and that they don't like the way Deion does things. And so, and here's the other thing, the underlying point in all this is nepotism. People hate nepotism. And when they see somebody who thinks they're only getting an opportunity because of their parents, like that feels disingenuous. In some instances, it feels disingenuous. I guess in some respects, like him following his dad everywhere probably necessitated that even more, or helped like fuel that even more, or that narrative, I guess, even more. But I'll say this, like as a 5th round pick now, you can't say that he only got here because of his dad. Like he got here now, and if he makes it, if he turns out to be something, it's going to be because he earned it. Yeah. And I think like the mentality he brings to the table is something that I think will be valuable. He talked about, wanting to prove that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski made the right choice in picking him. That was the thing. Because I asked him specifically about like, do you feel like you have something to prove given how this all went and everything? And he said, yeah, but it's mostly just like proving that they made the right pick in me and coming in and working hard. And so he already seems like he's focused on the next thing. I'll also say this when it comes to the personality side of things. There's another quarterback that played here not so long ago that had a very similar personality in terms of brash, doing things on the sideline, talking smack, whatever, and coming off that way. And he ended up being a fan favorite pretty quickly here in Cleveland. I'm just saying. I'm not going to say the name because it's going to rile people up. But I think you guys all know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, it's true. Like people like get all caught up in this, and what I think the truth of the matter is that Shedor's a really good football player. He's tough as nails. Like that's one thing that gets lost in all the shine and all like the celebration and all the jewelry and all that stuff is that this dude is tough. And there's a couple instances last year where he could have tapped out, he could have bowed out, but you do a blind quarterback resume and you look at all the quarterbacks who sat out their useless bowl games and all the quarterbacks who didn't, you'd be like, oh, I like that my quarterback played. Well, Shador Sanders played in his. Shador Sanders had the worst offensive line potentially in all of college football and got hit over and over and over and over again and took some nasty big hits and still stuck in there and made plays and put his body on the line for his team. I'm excited about it. It does make me scratch my head about the Dillon Gabriel pick. And truth be told, like I kind of feel bad for Dillon Gabriel. Like he kind of gets the short end of the stick because it's like, all right, I get my opportunity here. And then they draft Shedeur and like I spent a lot of time on social media, the social media reaction, outrage. You got Donovan Mitchell tweeting at him. You got Tristan Thompson, like minutes after the Cavs beat the Heat tonight. They're all like tweeting at Shador Sanders. The Browns have a bunch of like stuff set up for him, just like jersey swaps and all sorts of different cool things. But the excitement is obviously there. And I think that it's going to be matched with toughness and a really good football player that, I think in the long run, Browns fans are going to have an opportunity to really rally behind.
I want to play this clip. This is Andrew Berry talking about why they drafted Shador Sanders. We'll react on the other side and sort of have some final thoughts on the Shador Sanders part of this conversation, which dominated the day.
Shedeur, we talk oftentimes about quarterback being the most important position in the sport. We obviously spent a lot of time with Shedeur throughout the process. He's highly accurate, can play well from the pocket. Very productive college career, and we felt like it wasn't necessarily the plan going into the weekend to select 2 quarterbacks, but as we talk about, we do believe in best player available. We do believe in positional value, and we didn't necessarily expect him to be available in the 5th round, and so we love adding competition to every position room. And adding him to compete with the guys that are already in there, we felt like that was the appropriate thing for us. We live by our board. We felt like he was a good, solid prospect at the most important position. We felt like it got to a point where he was probably mispriced, relative to the draft. Really the acquisition cost was pretty light, and it's a guy that we think, can outproduce his draft slot. So I wouldn't say it's any more than that, Mary Kay. I think, Obviously Shedeur has kind of grown up in the spotlight, but our expectation is for him to come in here and work and compete. Nothing's been promised. Nothing will be given.
So I think one thing that should be absolutely undeniable from this move, which, by the way, this is only the second time the Browns have ever traded up for a player. The other time being JOK. So that one worked out pretty well. Granted, different situation, but the thing, though, that I think is undeniable, no matter how you feel about Shador Sanders, the experts who study this stuff, guys like Daniel Jeremiah, who I know doesn't work in an NFL front office, but he used to, they all said that the talent was there. Like, this guy was at least a second-round pick. And so to get that type of talent in the 5th round is a steal. When you pair it with the Dylan Gabriel thing, it's more interesting. I'll say this, too. I actually should have said this on Locked On Browns earlier. Andrew Berry was asked point blank, period, were you urged or pushed to make this move?
Yeah.
Essentially alluding to, was this a Jimmy Haslam thing? And Andrew said, he was quick to answer. He said, no, Jimmy lets us do our jobs. Now, you can decipher that for what it is, whatever. That was my first thought, though, when this happened, was this has Jimmy written all over it, that they would take a quarterback a couple picks ago, and then Shedor's still there, and he just kind of interjects himself, and he's like, guys, we got to do it at this point. I love this kid. If it's a guy he really liked, and he's like, I love this kid, and he's there in the 5th round, let's just do it. It felt like that way. Maybe he didn't, but that was my initial thought, at least, that was that Jimmy maybe got involved here. I'm not saying I'm mad about it, but it would explain why this sort of crazy, wild situation played out in the 5th round and on the last day of the draft here, what we thought was going to be a more mellow day overall.
Yeah, and the one that the thing that sticks out to me, when they drafted Harold Fannin and they cut to the Browns war room on draft night, and Jimmy was front and center, and I was like, oh yeah, they just picked Shador Sanders. He wants to be in the clips, all that stuff. And they didn't do that. But then the clips after they drafted Shador, and Andrew had a dead face on, kind of he was half clapping, looked like he was half asleep.
I will say, they were asked about that too, and they did say that they never won. That's actually cutting to them. So it could have been at a moment where they just weren't really looking great. But I will say, we all in the media caught that too, and we were like, oh, that doesn't look very good.
Well, so it's interesting. It's interesting that they said that, and I'll be candid, I didn't hear them say that or get to hear the question be asked. But it's interesting that they said that, they don't know when the cameras are going to cut to them, because they were just deadpan. At least throw a smile on or something. But one thing, and then we can get off this topic. I saw a tweet earlier, and I've been trying to find it, but I can't pull it up. But basically, the gist of it was all of the rookie quarterbacks who've been selected and their cap hits for next year, or their salary cap hits, or whatever it is. I didn't read too much into it, but the moral of the story is Cam Ward's cap hit is $49.5 million. Shedeur and Dylan Gabriel combined is $9 million. So it's when you put it like that, they got him in the 5th round. It is a low risk pick. If they get in there and all the stuff's true, that he, has a horrible attitude and he doesn't study and doesn't remember his plays, guess what? You bail out, and you're fine. You're no skin off your back. The reverse of that is that he's great and really good, tough, accurate, all the things, and you have a guy that is going to cost you $0 pretty much.
Yeah.
When you don't have any money to spend in that room.
Like I said, value was there. It made sense. If they really did do this based off of just their board, fine. We can talk here in a second about how we feel about this draft overall. This will open up now it comes down to a pretty interesting quarterback competition, which we can talk more about, I think, as the offseason progresses. But you got 4 guys. I figured they would have 4 guys. I actually mocked 2 quarterbacks in my latest mock draft, as we talked about on the last episode, which, by the way, that guy who was giving me crap because he was like, they're not going to draft 2 quarterbacks. Guess what? They did. So there you go. I could say something else.
Say what you actually want to say.
But regardless, I knew they were going to carry 4 guys, but they're only going to carry 3 during the season. So which 3 is it going to be? Do they trade somebody? That's going to be the next conversation. But another thing that Andrew Berry was asked about, because on top of taking 2 quarterbacks, the Browns also took 2 running backs in this draft. Quinshon Judkins, you mentioned, Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee, who I actually think it was another value pick there in the 4th round. Made a lot of sense to get that guy, add him to this backfield. And now you have this 2-headed monster back there, reminiscent of the Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt days, that sort of brings this new era to the backfield. And I got to be honest, I think it probably closes the door on fan favorite Nick Chubb. Now, before you respond, Megs, I'll let you respond after the video.
Yeah.
Andrew Berea, I think, gave some credence to the idea that this could be the sign that Nick Chubb will not be back in Cleveland with this response right here when he was asked about it.
I'd say, not necessarily, but, the complexion of our running back room has changed this weekend. And so as we, work through the, undrafted free agency process, maybe take a breath on Sunday, we'll reassess kind of where the roster is and what opportunities are available to us, on the veteran market, and then we'll operate from there.
Your thoughts, Anthony Moeglin?
Yeah, so we were texting earlier today when it went down. I was
you were in the spin zone.
I was spin zoning it, and it's going to be a hard day for Browns fans when it happens, for sure. But I do think that there's a world where this is the end of somebody. It's either the end of Nick Chubb or Jerome Ford. It's end of one or two, or maybe both. But Jerome Ford probably, in my opinion, is more likely because I believe his cap hits like they could save $3.5 million, something like that. And so it would make a little bit more sense to free up some of those dollars. Now, that said, I am approaching this from the perspective that Nick Chubb wants to be a running back number 3, okay? Because that's what he would be in this room. There's a really good chance he doesn't want to do that, right? Regardless of how much.
Well, or he could be 2, and like Samson becomes
right,
but,
2 or 3.
He's
not going to be the number 1 guy, and I'm not saying he wants that, or I've heard that he wants that, but there's the competitor in him who you're not getting under 700 pounds under a squat rack to be the running back number 3. You're just not doing that. He's going to want to compete and do that, and this certainly. While it is such an upgrade to that room that needed it, it does potentially lead you to believe that Nick Chubb's days are numbered.
So you bring up like his role, and that's I think the biggest problem. The biggest thing I'm trying to figure out, right, is you drafted these 2 rookies. It feels like you're setting it up where they can sort of bounce off each other, different sort of skill sets to an extent, use them in different ways. Samson's a little better of a pass catcher, but he still doesn't have a ton of tape on that. Quinshawn, that's part of his game. He's probably going to have to develop more. But we saw a little bit of that, I think, in the college ball playoff that he can catch passes. So they're versatile in their own ways. But it feels like you're setting the stage for these 2 guys to kind of be the future of the group. And so that's where I'm like, if you did bring Nick Chubb back, where does he even fit in this thing?
Yeah.
Like where does he fit into the conversation? I think it'd be great because like him and Quinshawn Judkins have somewhat similar run styles. They're sort of powerful guys. I think Nick Chubb's got a little bit more finesse to him. I think I think he's more Kareem Hunt, Quinshawn that is, than Nick Chubb. But like, it'd be nice to have him come and like mentor a guy like that. And that would be cool. But like Nick Chubb's also not just gonna like come here to like hang out and mentor guys. I wouldn't think. I mean, I know he loves Cleveland, so maybe he would. But I think he wants to be involved in some capacity. And I don't know how many touches he's getting in an offense here that now has these 2 really exciting young backs that you just drafted in the 2nd and the 4th round. Again, and I don't know if I said that here, but first time that's happened since 2013 that a team has taken 2 running backs within the first 4 rounds of a draft.
Yeah, and I think too, like Samson is one of my buddies texted me and called it, pretty much a carbon copy of Ohio State's running back room last year, but Samson's like Travion Henderson light is what he called him. And I was like, yeah, he's got that more of explosive speed, elusiveness to his game. He rushed for just south of 1,500 yards last year. And I think the number was 22 touchdowns. I did a video on him earlier today. But I could.
Yeah, he was the SEC player of the year.
Freak. Hey, he's a freak. And he didn't play against Ohio State in that playoff game. He's injured, but this year was his coming out party. You get great value there, and you pair him with Quinshawn. Like, there's your thunder and lightning, exactly what you had with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Like, this is the same exact thing. It's just the sucky part is that it probably does lead, to your point, the end of Nick Chubb's days.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I hate to.
But you are.
I hate to be the person sort of bringing this sobering reality to light, but I think it is true that this could be the end for Nick Chubb in Cleveland. And I tried to hold out hope. I was the drum saying I think he's going to be back, but I think we have to come to terms with what the Browns did this weekend. And as Barry said, they changed the complexion of things in that group. And I think that probably changes the complexion of their situation with Nick Chubb. Final thing, Megs, as the dust settles on this draft, it's a weird class to come away with because you have 2 running backs and 2 quarterbacks. like I'm torn because like the Gabriel pick, just it's like, how do I describe it? I don't know. It's like you're looking at pictures. I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this.
Pull back, pull back.
I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted at this point. It's just like this weird thorn. That's a good way to put it. The Gabriel pick feels like a weird thorn in a bush of roses.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel about it. But like I like generally overall, like if I took that pick away, it feels like this would be a class that I would generally like. You got 2 running backs, the quarterback that I thought from the start they should get, and you got him in the 5th round. You got a stud defensive tackle, a linebacker that could be really good for you as a rangy sort of off-ball guy. And if you replace the Gabriel pick with like maybe a wide receiver or maybe another offensive lineman, I would feel like totally satisfied with this draft, I think. So, I mean, I hate doing like draft grades. I'm not going to do that here, but I'm just trying to like in the moment sort of process like, what do we think of how the Browns did this weekend? And it's one of the weirder sets of classes that you'll come away with. But I honestly think it was a pretty solid draft overall with maybe one wart in it in terms of the Gabriel pick, which I just thought was a reach and unnecessary. And when you come away with 2 quarterbacks, it also feels like it was a little bit of a reach and something that they didn't need to necessarily do.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I was trying to pull up a graphic that I came across earlier today, and I'm going to try to get it in right here because if you just reframe your mindset on this, and I'm going to pull this up on the screen.
Dude, I'm so
shout out to
real
our
quick. I'm so
disappointed. I was going to text you. I was going to talk to you about it. Your guy. You can go. Go ahead. Your guy, Restrepo.
Xavier Restrepo is going to join Cam Moore with the Titans. Damn it.
Yeah. You're bummed. I knew you were going to be bummed. I just saw it come
That was the guy I wanted. I was like, get him in Cleveland. He's a slot guy you need. That's a bummer.
Yeah, you wanted him. But I'm going to pull this up here. So shout out to our guy at 10 Cent Beers here. Just scroll across this one. But if you were to rearrange our draft order here, and here's the selection: Mason Graham at 5, Shedeur at 33, Carson at 36, Quinshon at 67, Harold Fannin at 94, Sampson at 126, Gabriel at 144, and a first-round pick next year, everybody would be doing cartwheels down East 9th Street right now and celebrating at the stadium because that's an A-plus draft. Now, what I will say is this. I'm not going to be naive to the fact. I'm going to pull this up here and shout out to our guy, Dick Buck here. Thanks for jumping in and saying the Gabriel pick was a waste. It certainly feels that way, right? You look back, you could have got Xavier Watts, who we need a safety. Xavier Watts seemed to be like a perfect fit right there, and you go and reach for Gabriel. However, that said, we talked about it last night. He could be a long-term backup plan for you at the quarterback position. But now you're in a little bit of a competition there. So outside of that pick, I feel very good about what the Browns are coming away with from this draft. Great foundational pieces that'll be here for a long time, and some fun in there as well to get the fans excited with Shedeur at the end.
Sorry, I'm still reeling from the Restrepo.
I know you're upset, bro.
No, listen. I that aside, I do think your point on like if you rearrange the order, it would be maybe more
digestible,
tolerable.
Yeah,
digestible. Like you feel a little bit better about it. I do still think that like in general, the Gabriel pick is the one that I'm like, if you just take a different position there, I probably feel better about it as a whole.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I'm not going to do a grade because it goes against everything I stand for to do a grade. But I listen. I leave this class feeling like it was a pretty good. I think it was a solid weekend. I would say it was a solid weekend for the Browns with one pick that really was perplexing and some bold decisions to draft 2 running backs and 2 quarterbacks in this draft that a lot of other teams probably wouldn't do. But like I'm curious to see how this all shakes out. I think we still recognize this team is probably going to be pretty mediocre, but that's the reality that we're living in anyway. Yeah. And so I think at this point, it's about like seeing what these prospects kind of bring to the table, and especially somebody like Shador Sanders, who's going to bring a lot of attention and some stardom with them here to Cleveland.
And let's tell the truth about it. Yes, I would have preferred a bunch more weapons on offense. We need those, but if this team is really told us that they are not going to be overly competitive next year, they wanted to build a foundation around pieces that are going to be kind of those meat and potato types. Then again, when you have good draft picks next year, then you go all in on getting the flashy getting the slot receivers, the outside receivers, the guys who are going to make big plays when you're ready for it. I think that's part of the plan there as well.
Couple other comments real quick. Solja says, I'm a Sanders fan, following him so I am subscribing, I think is what he wanted to say.
Subscribe.
I hope he means he's subscribing to the channel. And Johnny Wishbone, I officially jumped on the bandwagon. Seems like we got a lot of Shador Sanders supporters on this channel, which I'm all about. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, just like our boy Soldier's going to do. He says he's going to hit the subscribe button. Be like him. To find more content like this, I got the audio from our conference call with Shador Sanders. First time he spoke to the media here in Cleveland. The press conference.
It's in the description. It's in the description.
Yeah, that's right. You put it in the description. That's a new thing you're doing. We got the press conference from Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. We got other stuff throughout the draft weekend that was going on here in Berea, and a whole bunch of written content as well over at si.com/NFL/Browns. Thank you for following along with us. It's been an eventful weekend. We appreciate those of you who check in with us each and every single time we do a hit here. And we hope you'll continue to follow along with all things Cleveland Browns, because this is just the beginning. Now these guys get in the building. You got rookie minicamp coming up. You got the offseason program. The quarterback competition begins now. Thanks for watching, Cleveland. We'll talk to you again soon.